And Pat and Ross were down in Destin, Florida, Sandestin, Florida. I'm going to say it correctly this time because it's really a tongue twister. They were there at SEC meetings. And Pat, you wrote I thought, very interesting story on SI.com. Good job. And you deemed the upcoming season, the most interesting year in SEC history is on the horizon. And that is obviously the big deal is Texas and Oklahoma arriving. We touched on this a little bit last time, but we didn't really get into it because we were talking TV. Obviously, Nick Saban is not there. And we have a playoff. And this kind of goes to our general theme that we can't wait for the season to get here because it's going to be absolutely phenomenal. The game's this could be the greatest season we've ever had in college football. I'm trying to think because it's a little bit like the Big Ten adding Oregon, but rarely as expansion. I think your point is really good. Generally speaking, expansion has not been like we're bringing in somebody who is better than a lot of us, right? Expansion, it's happened, right? Florida State joining the ACC back in the day, long time ago. Maybe the ACC expanding and bringing Miami in, Penn State joining the Big Ten but generally speaking, the powers that be in these expansions do not add someone they have to look at eye to eye or stand shoulder to shoulder and say,
hey, you want someone you can beat?
Someone you can beat. And so generally it's, okay, Nebraska's been good, but I think we can handle them. We'll see. That was a pretty big one in the Big Ten. But then it's like we're bringing in Maryland and Rutgers, or we're adding this. It's not been that, right? So agree, Ross?
Yeah, well, yeah, and look at what the SEC has done expansion-wise. I mean, the four expansion, the previous four most recent expansion teams in the SEC were Missouri, Texas A&M, and then South Carolina, Arkansas. Right? I don't think that the Floridas and Alabamas and Georgias and so on were in Tennessee's. We're really shaking in the boots at those four schools. There might have been some, a little bit of fear in Texas A&M and just its resources and its budget and all that. But yeah, usually you're going to bring in somebody that you can beat. I remember, for a long time, Liberty kept trying to get into a conference and they kept being denied. Now, eventually they were invited to Conference USA and they competed for the first time last year there. I would ask around why won't anyone let Liberty in? And there were two reasons, but one of them was, Russ, they just write blank checks. We don't want somebody to come in and outspend us and very likely beat us on the field. And lo and behold, what happens? Year one in Conference USA, they go undefeated and win the league. So you don't see that happen as much, but I think in this new world, we're going to see that happen a lot more, and we have. Look at Florida State in Clemson trying to leave the ACC. They're probably going to go somewhere at some point. Somebody's going to let them in at some point, likely. So there's just this consolidation of big brands, and we're going to see more of that, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think and it's not just like the team's hot right now. When you bring Texas particularly in, and I know fans roll their eyes because Texas does not deliver based on their promise, but like nobody really is bigger than Texas. They've got the money, the resources, and the potential to be the best. And occasionally they get themselves organized and they are that. But it's like in basketball, it's always been just befuddling. They had the TJ Forde year and a couple, here or there, they have they should be great in basketball. There's so many good basketball players in Texas. They have so much money. It's such a great city, all the different things. So it's not even like, all right, we're bringing them in. They got a good coach. It's like, all right, we're Alabama. We're never going to be, nobody's as big as Texas. This is going to be a real match. And Oklahoma, obviously, unbelievable athletic tradition, a little bit more population-wise and resource-wise, similar to a lot of the southern states. But to do that, I think really shows the SEC. Yeah, they were big game hunting this time, and it took a special teams to get in. And so I guess Pat's point is really good, because when you look at, like, we've bemoaned what has been lost in the Big 12, and that sucks. But now we can do that and also go, this is really interesting. How does Georgia and Florida and Alabama shape up against this in LSU?
Dan, I've got a little bit of a bone to pick. I don't know if the SEC was big game hunting as much as Texas was hunting for.
That's right.
For a new,
they called them. They called them. They called them. Oh no, I don't need this.
We had nothing to do with it.
They knocked on the door, and as Greg Sankey put it one time to me, if they knock on your door and you don't answer, they're going to knock on the door next door.
Well, they went big game answering. Okay, because a lot of people knock on the SEC door and they shut the blinds.
That's true. Correct.
They got a ring doorbell.
West Virginia.
Takes two to tango.
They got a ring. I did not mean to insinuate that the SEC was hunting for Texas. Strike that from the record.
I think Texas was on the prowl for another league, no matter what. But anyway, I think the point is made is that when you that the SEC this time around, right, was not going to deny a program like Texas, and I don't think anybody would, right? Texas went to the next door, which was maybe the ACC. They certainly weren't closing the door, or they certainly weren't not opening it. And same for the Big Ten. So, and the Pac-12 opened the door, 10, 12 years ago? Pac-12 opened the door, but Texas never stepped through.
Almost.
It was close. ESPN reported that they were going to the Pac-12, and ESPN was wrong.
Oh.
Get that jab in.
That's like
I just remember
14-year-old
watching it on live
failure.
Yeah. I'm watching it on live TV, and I'm like, oh, don't say it because you're wrong, and I know you're wrong. Don't say it, and they said it.
These things happen. All right, Pat. Anything else on this, or you can get to Nick Saban?
No. I mean, you guys covered it. This is like immediate power injection at the highest level, and so. That is part one of the intrigue there. And then, yes, part two is you are taking out the greatest coach in history and the guy who took Alabama from behemoth to whatever's bigger than behemoth and absolutely dwarfed the rest of the sport for about 15 years. So the change there is massive. We'll see if it's as pronounced in terms of the impact on Alabama as it was when Bear Bryant retired, and they kind of wandered in the wilderness for a decade, and then Gene Stallings won a title. I don't know whether that'll be the case here, but I like Kalen DeBoer. I think he was a good hire. I think he's going to do well there, but he ain't Nick Saban, at least not yet. We'll see if he can become Nick Saban. And it was interesting talking to him. He's trying to figure out, I think, the amount of respect, even reverence that you pay to a Nick Saban while also putting your own stamp on the program. Said he's talked to him often. I asked, what did you talk about? He said, personnel for our team, but personnel for the rest of the league and how the rest of the league shapes up. But, I think Saban, obviously he's around, he's interested, but he's also a smart man too and knows he has to let DeBoer do his thing.
We talked about this before, but I spent some time there a couple times this spring, and it is amazing. He's not really around the building very much. I think he didn't go to any spring practices except the spring game, maybe. I think he really has let kind of Kalen do his thing. He's at it when I was there. He was out of town. Nick was, and he's been out of town a lot. He's been on the road a lot. He's been doing speaking engagements, coming up here to DC as well. And so he's just kind of let him go. And it's really been pretty impressive. And we don't see that a lot. We've seen the opposite happen when legendary coaches retire, and then they get an office, next door to the new coach on the floor, and they're in the building a lot. And that never really seems to work.
I think it'll help Saban's working. He's going to be gone every weekend and game day.
Right.
Busy on his own stuff. I would not be surprised if he did not go and live in Tuscaloosa every week. I mean, just the travel and all that. Maybe he's got private jets and everything still. I don't know, but who knows what he does. He's a smart guy, and he's smart enough to know how to help Alabama's program. I think what's really interesting. Go ahead, Pat.
No, I just said an interesting possible window into Saban's like aversion to downtime and like wasted time, and probably to like staying on the road. Steve Sarkisian, who used to be his offensive coordinator, obviously at Alabama, now the coach at Texas, he came in there in Destin to the media room, and he said at one point, we had this reception last night, and then he was there talking the next day, and he's like, did Saban fly home and come back each day, or did he actually stay? And it's kind of probably a window into like Saban ain't going to just sit around anywhere.
Yeah,
he's going to be wherever he needs to be, and then he's getting out
of there. Yeah. Yeah, it's like everything's a recruiting trip at this point. I think what's interesting is for, 10, 12, 15 years, really since Urban Meyer left, Saban, really since he arrived back at Alabama, but certainly when Meyer left, and maybe when Steve Spurrier was done at South Carolina, like the entire league revolved around Nick Saban. Other teams would beat them occasionally. There were other, obviously, huge names. I mean, I'm not saying anything ever revolved around Spurrier, but he was such a big personality. Meyer could go toe-to-toe with Saban at the beginning. Obviously, Les Miles won a title. He was a character. There's been different guys through the league, but everything was like he was that North Star for the league. You had to beat him, and it wasn't going to be easy. But B, he was constant, and he was the statesman. And even when guys would come up, like Kirby Smart, obviously got the program equal or better in the last few years, but he was still Saban's former assistant. And so it's like all of a sudden he's gone, and you go, who's going to be that if there is going to be one? I don't know that there will be anything like that. You look at the current coaches, and there's plenty of candidates. They're big personalities, right? Kirby Smart, obviously, Steve Sarkisian, Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss, Josh Heupel at Tennessee, a Shane Beamer maybe at South Carolina. There's just a lot of guys. Eli Drinkwitz at Missouri. There's a lot of guys that could rise up. I don't know if they'll never dominate a league or be that Nick Saban guy. I don't even know. Kalen DeBoer too. I mean, can't rule him out. I don't think anyone could win as many titles as Nick Saban going forward. I'm not even sure Nick Saban would have won as many under a system where you have to win 3 or 4 playoff games a year. But who do you think could become that? If there is somebody who's going to become that kind of alpha dog in the league, who do you think it might be, Ross?
Yeah, I certainly Kirby is well down the path of doing that, further down than maybe anybody else. But you look at Sark at Texas and the resources that Texas has, what they did, how he's built the program up to where it is. I think he's got the Saban. Obviously, spent a few years under Nick, so he's got kind of the Saban plan, so to speak. I think he's one that certainly can get it done. And again, in an age where players are going to get direct pay from schools, and I don't want to launch into the house case stuff, but can also get outside third party NIL that doesn't count toward the cap, the rev share cap. A place like Austin, Texas is a pretty good one to be in. Anywhere with a massive city like that is going to have a huge advantage, I think, going forward. It's a whole nother story that we could spend a whole pot on. But I think the plain and simple is Texas seems to be primed and has the coach to do it. So I'd probably say him. But you also look at, what's going on at Tennessee. You mentioned Josh Heupel, in what they have resource-wise in the NIL age. They probably have distributed to their football players, their collective, just as much as anybody else. So you look at their resources there and just the passion there that the fans have. So those are some I would spotlight. And then, of course, you got Brian Kelly there.
Yeah, I forgot to mention
at LSU. Can he get it going there?
Yeah, Dana, I wish I would have used the term you used it in my column, North Star for Saban, because he's.
That's why I'm me and you're you. I mean, that's how.
You're the wordsmith. I should have asked you for a little.
These things happen.
Kiffin down in Destin made mention that the guy, kind of like the leader in the meetings now, is Kirby. And that makes sense. Kirby's the second most tenured, I believe, in the SEC behind Mark Stoops. He's the most successful current coach. He won 2 titles before he turned 50, and Saban didn't win any till he was in his 50s. So, I mean, he's ahead of the Saban flight plan, which is pretty remarkable. But to your point, I don't think anybody's winning that many championships again, especially in a 12-team playoff era or 14 or whatever the heck we end up with. But, it's Kirby Smart's league, I would say now. But, yeah, Ross brings up a good point. I think Sark could absolutely come in and become the boss of the league. It's not out of the question there. And then we'll see with everybody else. Yeah, there's hope at Tennessee. There's obviously, LSU is back functioning at a high level, although not a national championship level again yet, but could be. So we'll see if Florida ever gets back up off the mat. But Kirby Smart, to me, is the guy that runs the conference right now.
That running the meetings. Reminded of the story of the old Atlantic 10 basketball with John Chaney at Temple. Obviously, larger-than-life figure. And they were saying, I was talking to Skip Prosser, the late great Skip Prosser, who later coached Wake Forest, but he was at Xavier at the time. And he said, yeah, he's like, Chaney she shows up at the meeting. There's no meeting. It's just whatever Chaney's talking about. And then he said, my proudest moment was about 4 years in. We're having some discussion over who knows what these coaches talk about. There's coaches meeting. And he points at me and goes, that was a pretty good idea by Skip. And he's like, John Chaney knows my name after 4 years. I have made it. Other than that, it was like that guy. She had to be in the league 4 or 5 years before Chaney was even going to bother learning your name.
I believe it. And I would imagine Chaney probably wasn't referring to him as that guy. It's probably that MF.
Well, yeah, he might have been yelling at everybody. I don't know, but Skip Prosser was so proud. He's like, John Chaney knows who I am. I'm like, well, I mean, there's only
that's funny.
That was when like the Atlantic 10 had 10. There wasn't really that many teams. 10, right. It shouldn't be that hard. But anyway, I digress. Okay, another point by Pat. I think I don't want to, but I want you to describe it. Is we've got some new teams that have like a lot of excitement. Ole Miss,
yeah.
Missouri, who else? Who? Like, there's a lot of excitement in some spots where there hasn't always been a lot of excitement.
Yeah, I think those two you nailed. They could start the year in the top 10. I mean, that rarely happens. I mean, it's happened in Mississippi's past. I don't know, maybe in the 70s for Missouri or the 60s, early 70s or 60s, they would start a year in the top 10. But I mean, it's been a long, long time. But they finished the year. Both of them had great seasons. If either of them could have beaten Georgia, they might have been playing in the SEC championship game. They did not. They gave Georgia, especially Missouri gave Georgia a good game, but couldn't get over that hump. But returning quarterbacks, returning a lot of other talent, skill position talent. Missouri has to build on defense, but they bring in one of the top 3 recruits in the country at defensive end. We'll see if he's ready to play right away. But there is hope in places where you're usually like, hey, are we going to be bowl bound or not? Are we going to, can we get to 7 wins? Can we get to 8? And they're talking, can we win 11 or 12? So, and with the expanded playoff, even if you can't beat Georgia, which is usually the case, you can still go to the playoff. So there is significant energy, I think, and enthusiasm in those 2 spots.
That's a great point. It gives, I think, the expanded playoff gives hope to those type of teams that are in leagues where you have such a dominant like powerhouse, whether that's Ohio State in the Big Ten, Ohio State, Michigan in the Big Ten, or Georgia, Alabama in the SEC. The teams that are below that next rung feels like they have more hope than ever that you don't have to beat them to win a national championship anymore. You really don't. It would be good, probably would help, but you don't have to beat them. You're going to get a shot in the playoff to potentially even avoid them in an expanded playoff. So the third, fourth, maybe the fifth best team in the SEC and Big Ten are going to potentially find their way into the playoff and might just avoid their conference powerhouse program that they can't get over the hump.
I think the playoff, it kind of segues into the playoff being one part of this, but that's exactly it. And Ole Miss and Missouri being perfect examples. I'd throw Tennessee in there too. I think Tennessee's schedule, they're at Oklahoma, they're at Georgia, and they get Alabama at home. If this was 4 years ago, would I like Tennessee's chances of sweeping those three and then probably then an SEC West rematch in an SEC title game to go undefeated and make the playoff? That's a hill. That's a mountain to climb, and they live in the mountains. But could they do enough to get I can see Tennessee hosting a playoff game, and which would be unbelievable, right? Neyland State. I don't know if there's a better place to host a playoff game than the idea of Neyland Stadium hosting a playoff game in Knoxville. But I could totally see that happening with Tennessee and saying, what an unbelievable season that would be, where before it's like, well, the bar to what's a great season would be too high. And I would say the same thing with Missouri and Ole. If they can host a playoff game, be 5 through 8, let alone just make the playoffs, it would be the biggest sporting event to ever occur in Oxford, Columbia, and even Knoxville, which has had, some of the most, obviously a couple years ago, that Alabama game. So I look at these teams and go, boy, there is a path now. The other thing with it is the SECs like to say, hey, we're the SEC, as they chant it, we're the league where it matters, it matters the most, all that stuff. Well, the playoff gives them even more of a chance to show their domination.
Mm-hmm.
It's not,
and show off campus, like you mentioned. The home sites. I wanted to piggyback really quick, Dan. I've got pulled up the 5 to 8 seeds for the last 10 years. What teams are hosting playoff games? And I'm not going to go through every one of them, but there's some really kind of electric atmospheres in here, and then some others that that would be cool. Like TCU would have hosted a playoff game. That would have been kind of cool. A very small, kind of a smaller stadium. But then you have Penn State on here, Michigan, Auburn, Oklahoma, Notre Dame is on here multiple times, right? Because Notre Dame can't receive the bye, so they would have been the 5th seed a couple times over the last 10 years, and they would have hosted a playoff game. Baylor, some interesting ones. Last year, of course, I think this is last year, would have been Missouri would have hosted a playoff game.
I think when you look at it, it's like I've seen massive games at Neyland Stadium. I haven't really seen many in Oxford and Columbia. I covered an Egg Bowl once when they were both really good. There's been some big game, Alabama and LSU come, but those cities would have that opportunity, and the league would have an opportunity to say, hey, the Final 4 teams, we got 3 of them. Final 8, we got 5, right? We really are the dominant league, and the depth of that domination would be pretty interesting.
Mississippi State, first year if the playoff was expanded back in 2014, I think, right?
Yeah, it was 2014.
Mississippi State would have hosted a playoff game as the 8th seed, and I think we've talked about this before. They would have hosted Ole Miss, the 9th seed.
Start Vegas.
Would that have been any good?
It would be a lawless place. I would call the National Guard.
The COVID year, Indiana would have hosted a playoff game.
Okay, I think we can live with that.
How about that? The Hoosiers.
Let's just forget.
Don't hate on the Hoosiers, Dan.
I'm all on the Hoosier bandwagon. The new Hoosiers.
Pat would have been able to
Wait till
drive
they get
there.
Juju Lewis.
I could have driven there easily.
Yeah.
If Missouri hosts a playoff game, it would be the coldest game in SEC history. That's for sure, because that is Midwestern winter, and if it's mid-December, look at it.
Yeah, so many potential spots in that league because of the depth. All right, one more I think you have in here too, but the new rivalries or old rivalries restored.
Yeah.
Right. It just shakes up the schedule. And I think when they set this schedule, right, they're going to do this. They're probably going to do this like 5-3 thing, 6-3, whatever they're going to do. They got to get it set. But like the renewal of Oklahoma, Missouri is great.
Yep.
Oklahoma, Arkansas could be fantastic. Those are border states.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, Texas, and you're adding the Red River, which is one of the top.
You're keeping the Red River,
but you're adding it to the SEC.
Okay, you're adding it to the SEC.
The SEC gets to
stockpile.
claim it. It's like when you watch the Big Ten Network and they show great performances in Big Ten history, and they show like the 71 Nebraska Cornhuskers, and you're like, okay.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I didn't know. Johnny Rogers, really? Okay. Yeah, you claim it. You got to claim it. So you've added that, which is obviously one of 2 or 3 best rivalries in college football. I don't know. Top.
And no longer on 11 a.m.
No, 2:30.
2:30
Dallas
which
time.
Texas
That's
fought,
a big win for the
hard.
fans. Big win for the
You think
fans.
that's going to be
I
permanent?
think OU and Texas both fought for that. Yeah, I would imagine that they're like, I think one of the requests to get into the league from Texas and Oklahoma was you have to move that game off of 11 a.m. And I think you're going to see that game on 2:30 for a while.
Hangovers won. Is that it? Like the complaints by hungover fans finally won? I'm in favor. I mean,
That's it.
Good a
That's
reason
it.
as any.
Yeah.
I'd like that better than like some executive saying I'd make a little bit more money, or if we're at noon. Good
Right.
for
No.
Advil sales will drop, so everyone can sleep in a little longer.
Yeah, and it might alleviate the horrendous last-minute crush getting to the state fair because people are just waking up, hungover, blind at 9:30 a.m. and staggering off towards the fair at the last minute.
The traffic is a disaster.
Awful.
Yeah.
I would say if the way that they assuaged it with A&M bringing Texas in is to give A&M the first game at home against Texas in the renewal there. I mean, that's going to be humongous. And like the A&M people were excited. Yeah, you're coming to Aggieville. Bring it. Texas, Arkansas going to play again. And that is a long time old, bitter rivalry. I think I don't know whether they invented it, but maybe popularized it. Arkansas with Houston Nutt, the horns down. That might have actually really accelerated the use of horns down that has so bruised the sensitive feelings of the Longhorns.
Oklahoma, Missouri, too.
Yeah.
I mean, not that's some long, rivalry series, but they certainly.
1912, first time they played each other and played often.
LSU's going to get into it with Texas a lot. You know that. Like that's going to be
Texas.
Some bitterness there.
The flagship schools of the border states, and they've played. They've played a few times in some bowls and regular season games, and
there's just a lot going on there. Yeah, so I agree with you, Pat. This could be this is the most interesting, and I think it'll be the most exciting season in SEC football history. It's going to be good.
Yeah, I agree with you, Pat. Clip that, save it, keep it.
Damn,
doesn't happen all that often.
Can't believe it. Be back after this message. Rumblings out of North Carolina, where lawmakers have come up with a bill, see if it passes, that would require North Carolina and North Carolina State to play every single year in football and basketball. And which is obviously a preeminent shot at, in case this thing splits up somehow. They would also require that UNC and NC State play at least one of either East Carolina, which is located in North Carolina, East Carolina, Appalachian State, and Charlotte every year. And they would have to play home and away every 6 years. So they would require, say, the Tar Heels to play one of them every year. And, there'd be obviously 3 home, 3 away over that period of time, over a 6-year period with each of these teams. Prominent Republican House members have put this out there. The bill states sports tourism is vital to the economy of North Carolina, and intrastate collegiate athletics generates millions of dollars in economic impact to the state. It is a priority of the General Assembly to encourage intrastate collegiate athletic rivalries in order to promote economic development. We're making sure that we get those games, said Jason Sane, who's one of the sponsors. They can't not play. There's enough wiggle room in there as far as space and calendar, and we get the maximum benefit without real injury to them. It's what fans want to see, and it's a good way to do it. So this is very interesting. This is politicians, the government getting in and saying this is important. Now, obviously, the biggest rivalry in the state of North Carolina involves a private school, Duke and North Carolina. So they can't really require Duke to do something. But this really sets up. What are your thoughts on this concept, Pat?
You know what? I'm not opposed to it. I think that they're protecting what a lot of the fans and their constituencies want. I mean, they certainly want North Carolina and North Carolina State to play each other. It was, in the state where I live in Kentucky, it was threatened to go to the legislature to make Kentucky and Louisville play each other in basketball. And that finally did help push Kentucky to agree to a series. And it's been, probably the most significant series of any kind that's happened in the history of the state. And you know what? You want UNC and NC State, even if they are not in the same conference, they should play each other, shouldn't they? I mean, in a ideal world. And then I have no problem with including some of the quote unquote smaller schools in the mix as well. You may be you may be trying to advocate for a certain constituency there, but shoot, Appalachian State's a very good program. East Carolina has had some great times. Charlotte could be theoretically on the rise, should be a good program. So I don't think you're asking those teams to take on bad games necessarily. Matter of fact, they may what they may not like about it is they've taken on games they could lose. But I have no problem with this.
Yeah, I am. Well, this goes back to kind of the landscape of college athletics right now. In the group of 5 schools, I think one of their biggest fears is that the power conference schools stop playing them and thus stop paying them the game guarantees that can go upwards of $1.5 million for a game. And guess what? $1.5 million is, sometimes 1/25th, 1/30th of these group of 5 schools' budgets. It's a significant portion, especially if they have a couple of them on the schedule. You can imagine that pays for their head coach, basically. So this is certainly a measure to keep the sharing of the wealth, right, from the rich to the poor. You see some states that where the flagship, big power school doesn't ever play anybody, any smaller conference schools. I can think of like Arkansas and Arkansas State, right? They haven't played, or there's some kind of like provision or something where they don't play, or I don't know the particulars, but they haven't played in forever. LSU and UL don't play that often in Louisiana. And just recently, Mississippi State and Ole Miss played games against Southern Miss. In that, they had gone years and years of doing that. As one person told me at LSU, it's kind of like the old saying of throwing the football. 3 things can happen and 2 of them are bad. When you're a power conference school and you're a flagship of the state, and you play your lower like little brother or something in the state, there's 2 things can happen, and one of them is expected, and one of them will get you fired. So they kind of avoid avoid them. One other thing I want to say about North Carolina, man, the legislature and the Board of Governors and the boards of North Carolina, they have been on a tear, haven't they, the last few months? They've really made a lot of news for themselves. Going back to the North Carolina Board of Governors back in January, basically making it where any move that North Carolina or NC State makes in realignment has to be approved by the Board of Governors, which oversees all of the schools in the state, which people suggest to mean that NC State and North Carolina would would have to stay together wherever they move, if they do move. And this law would seem to kind of suggest that as well, right? They want to keep them together. They want to keep them playing together.
Keeping our man Brian Murphy, W-R-A-L, busy. That's whose story it is here. I should have said that earlier. It's interesting because both North Carolina and North Carolina State actually do play these guys. Like this year, North Carolina is is hosting Charlotte. Next year, they're at Charlotte. So they will go on the road. Later, and then NC State has a couple series going with, they have one East Carolina. They're hosting next year. They're playing Western Carolina. They're hosting Western Carolina. They play NC and North Carolina A&T. They have a home and home with East Carolina. They have a home and home with Charlotte later. So it's really not that big of a switch for these schools. But I like it, and I get it. Like, ideally, I guess I would want each team to have the freedom to do whatever. But if I'm a lawmaker in North Carolina and I'm, as you said, $1.3 million, okay, 2026 season for North Carolina, they're at TCU, so that's a regular good game. And then they have East Tennessee State and UConn they're paying, right? And then later they go to UConn. I guess you could say North Carolina wants to recruit up in New England or something. Maybe that, but if they're playing Richmond, they're playing North Alabama. I mean, some of these aren't. But like if James Madison, they're hosting twice. Like if I'm a North Carolina, why are we giving money into Virginia? Let's keep it in North Carolina. So on that element, sure. I can see a lot of states doing this and saying, what are we doing? You guys got to play these schools.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't mind seeing it in a lot of places. In 2022, North Carolina State played at East Carolina and North Carolina played at App State. So they've done it before, and that's, whether that's purely cost saving or whether that's thinking, hey, we're going to put as many fans in their stadium as they do, and so it's not really going to be that much of a road game while saving us money. I don't know, but these are not schools that have absolutely refused to do it before.
I just think too, like if this is going to be again, I don't really want to disrespect the Appalachian State program, certainly, but it's a bigger deal if you're a group of 5 team playing an in-state school than just any power. Like it would mean more to Charlotte to play North Carolina than it is for Northern Illinois to play North Carolina, which I think they do, or maybe they played NC State. I can't remember on the list, but you know what I mean? Like it would mean more for the Northern Illinois guys to go play Illinois. And so I think you kind of get that. Here's one point I want to bring up. I've mentioned this in the past, but we talk about, and really it's the line in the Murphy story here from the senator or the rep or whatever this guy is, or the bill, just the bill. But sports tourism is vital to the economy of North Carolina. And this is what I would do if I was North Carolina and NC State. I'd say, all right, we're good with this bill if you subsidize us in some way as we go forward in money. How can we remain relevant against the SEC? And I've said this in the past about like Clemson. Like I think the economy of that part of South Carolina, maybe the whole upstate of South Carolina, benefits greatly by Clemson being a big deal in college football. I mean, we've all covered Clemson games. The city of Clemson is overwhelmed. You got to get hotel rooms in Anderson, in Spartanburg, even, right, all the way to Charlotte sometimes. But the whole area, all the Airbnbs, all the money that comes in, and states will give hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, and sometimes $1 billion. I think New York's given $1 billion to the Buffalo Bills to build new pro stadiums. You could close a gap in North Carolina if you sat there and said, we'll give North Carolina and NC State $10 million a year out of our budget, if you agree to that, and it helped close that gap. Maybe that keeps leagues together. Like, I know the idea of publicly subsidizing these athletic departments is like wild, and it runs against my personal opinion of what we should be doing with tax money. But like, there's a huge value loss to the economy if you all of a sudden were like, oh, I'm sorry, Clemson football, NC State football is no longer a big deal. So I don't know. I mean, they subsidize everything else in these economies. Why not this? And could you go in and say, hey, we like your bill, but how about a little scratch for us? I mean, it doesn't close the whole gap, but I mean, for a state like North Carolina's general budget, $10 million a year, $5 million each. That's nothing.
Yeah, you did mention that before. I thought it was an interesting premise. And if I were the schools, I would I'd be sitting there saying, hey, you know what? We want to stay in the ACC. We want to be able to play our games, that fans can go to, as opposed to, having to join the SEC and travel more and lose more. Maybe can you help us out and see if they would? I mean, I would have somebody in there lobbying if it were going to come to that, of like, how, if you're trying to just examine all ways that you can close this horrendous gap we've heard about between the ACC and the SEC and the Big Ten. Explore all options, and that's one that I would explore if I were them.
Well, it is going to be interesting in this rev share model if you do see more universities give funding to the athletic departments to help out, give some kind of support. And thus, of course, that money in a lot of ways is coming from the state in a lot of these schools. So, right, yeah, I mean, so you're basically taxing the students. So that's going to be interesting to see if that does become more of a trend. I was talking to an AD, one in the Big 12, one in the ACC about this. Like, do you expect more university support in this new model? And the reaction was, we've got to have it, sort of thing. They're in a position where they need some kind of help. If it's not direct funds of some kind, then it's like I don't want to say a waiver, but a discount, like for scholarship, paying back scholarships and such. So you might see that happen more and more. By the way, wanted to clarify the Arkansas State. I did find a story on Yahoo actually from a few years ago. They have never played ever in football. They have never played in football. They are scheduled to play for the first time next year. Arkansas and Arkansas State. We'll see if that game actually happens. But Arkansas legislators in 2001 introduced a bill to get the two schools to play a series. It did not pass. So this has certainly happened before.
Will they ever go to Jonesboro? That would be cool. I know that doesn't make sense because you'd want a lot of people.
Unlikely. Very unlikely.
Little Rock, at least. Yeah, get yourself the Little Rock. I don't know.
Yeah. Those dynamics are so interesting between big brother, little brother in some states. I remember at one point saying that, like, Marshall and West Virginia had a building rival, and the West Virginia fans, oh no, they're not our rivals. No way. They refused to even associate with them. You do run into some of those things out there.
Yeah. Well, I just wonder, I think you go beyond the school and you start lobbying the states. I mean, I don't know, and so I'm speaking out of turn, but generally speaking, the Carolina Panthers, the Hornets, any NASCAR track are going to seek some public funding, because then they're going to go, look how much money we bring in, look how important we are to your city, and you can make those arguments. Those are billionaires that own those teams. Maybe not the NASCAR tracks anymore, but like, those are billionaires that own the team, and you're sitting there saying, I need the money. Well, this is your state school. And like, what's the economic benefit of people coming into the state? I think if you ask a lot of people to name like five or like start naming things about the state of North Carolina, college sports would be, they got the mountains, you got the beaches, you got, but like research trying, like they're known for education and these rivalries, Tobacco Road. So college basketball would be in the top 5 or something. I don't know,
Yeah. I mean, that's a good point. Like a lot of these conversations I'm having with ADs about university support is, shouldn't they help us more, because we're basically a free marketing arm, right? The front porch of the university. So spend more, help us more. But you're talking about, hey, state legislature, spend more.
We're to fill your hotels.
We're marketing for your
and
state.
And we'll fill your hotels.
Yeah, it's a good point.
I mean, I don't know. We all go to games, and North Carolina is a little. They don't have but let's take Alabama. Okay, I usually stay at in Birmingham, at a courtyard in Birmingham. Like, that place is benefit, and that's all filled with Alabama. Like, it's all football fans on a Friday night.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I mean, at the UAB courtyard, like how many people are staying at that thing on a Friday night? Except this, I've done an Airbnb in Tuscaloosa. We paid a fortune to some woman, right? This is her house.
Yeah.
She made that. I mean, those people are making huge amounts of money renting out their house for 2 nights. And, so let alone the restaurants and the rental cars, and it spreads far beyond ticket sales and things like that. It gets into everyday people. I don't know that, again, this runs against what I would believe in, but if I'm them, I would start saying, look, if the Carolina Panthers are worth, hey, we need this amount of money to upgrade, or we might leave, right? There's always we're going to leave. Well, North Carolina's threatening to leave. They're just threatening to leave leagues. They can't relocate, but all of a sudden they're not playing Wake. Yeah. Well, if I'm over in Wake Forest, I'm that rep in Winston-Salem. I'm going, wait, I need North Carolina sticking around. Maybe that helps.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's a very good. And given the pod's place as some of the thought leaders in college athletics, I mean, I expect athletic directors to listen to this and mobilize to do exactly what we're suggesting.
They will hire a consultant to tell them exactly what I just told them.
Well, yes, consultant Dan for free here on the pod.
Yeah, that's it.
The one thing you'll run into problems,
or something like only New Mexico State's the only one that sends me booze. Like at least they're helping me out. Mario,
there we go.
The one problem I would think you'll run into, well, there's going to be a lot of problems, but one of the problems is the state lawmaker who looks at your books and says like, oh, wait, what are you paying your head coach? And you need how much from us? More? What's that? Yeah. What is that again? What are you paying your assistant strength coach? And you need what?
What are the Carolina Panthers paying out? They suck.
Not as much as college probably these days.
Yeah, right.
All right, let's wrap this up. We talked recently about the excitement in Lincoln, Nebraska for the Dylan Raiola era is so exciting. Someone trashed the local DMV throwing fish and carrots around. People are just losing their mind out there.
Fish vandal.
Yeah. Well, I expect Dylan to have a huge career. We're excited for this career, bringing it back. But we've got the greatest comeback, perhaps in Nebraska history. Here, I got the story of the greatest comeback. A woman named Constance Glantz, 74. She was pronounced dead, went to a funeral home, and was found breathing.
Oh dear. Oh, no. What city are we in
Lincoln.
Here? Kearney?
Lincoln.
Oh, it's Lincoln. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, Lincoln. A lot going on in Lincoln these days.
She was found alive at the funeral home after being pronounced dead. She was still breathing. The staff at a local funeral home she was brought to noticed about 2 hours after coming in that she was still breathing. They performed CPR on her and taken her to the hospital.
Oh, my.
Constance. It's a sad story. She ends up passing away soon after. But how about that? Think Dylan can handle that? People's Court.
Constance, all credit to Constance, and maybe not so much credit to the medical personnel who declared her dead.
They were checking the Husker online message boards or something, talking about Dylan.
Yeah. Yeah. Dylan going to have a good pocket protection this year. We better find out. That woman, I'm pretty sure she's dead. Just send her off. Good for Constance, though. I mean, she at least she got a little bit more out of life, and gave the funeral home a thrill. I'm sure. Got to be the one and only time that somebody left there alive when they came in dead and left alive.
So, lost a customer.
That's impressive.
Yeah. She had been sick. I don't want to make light of someone's, but I'm proud of her. She had been sick. Her death was anticipated. This was not it happens. Well, it's all of us. We're all going to
live up to her name.
Constance Glantz. This is a very unusual case, Chief Deputy Ben Houchin from Lancaster County Sheriff's Office said. They had to hold a press. Been doing this 31 years. Nothing like this has ever gotten to this point before.
Well, I hope not.
Yeah, Right. If that's a regular occurrence, we might need a better coroner or whatever it is.
In June last year, a 76-year-old woman, we might have mentioned her, Bella Montoya in Ecuador, was
was she actually in a coffin?
Yeah, she was dead. They put her in the coffin.
I remember that, yeah.
She was then taken to the funeral parlor for a vigil, and 5 hours later, she was found alive in the coffin because the funeral home people in Ecuador opened the coffin to change her clothes for viewing, and she was alive.
Oh my God. Wow.
Another time, 2018, don't give up. Run from the light. Run from a South African woman in 2018.
Run from the light.
Initially declared dead following an accident, and she was put in a mortuary fridge, and she was alive.
Oh my
She's
God.
like, yo, chilly in here. This guy, and this is a BBC story. Dr. Stephen Hughes from the British thing, the town. I'm not doing it. Chelmsford on the Hudson or whatever the hell the thing is. From some school. This guy's an expert, according to the BBC. He said it's not a big mistake. Sometimes somebody may look like they're dead, but they're not quite dead.
Don't they? They have instruments to check that, right? Like heartbeats and pulse rates.
Princess Bride, isn't there something in the Princess? Careful examination is necessary. Thank you, Dr. Stephen Hughes.
Yeah, brilliant.
Right?
Oh my goodness. I like that. Motivational life advice from the pod. Don't give up.
Don't give up, man. Don't ever. Jimmy V.
Run away from
Jimmy
the light.
V. Don't give up. Don't ever give up, man. You already said I'm dead. Put me in the fridge.
Just because they put you on the just because they put you on the slab doesn't mean you're done.
Constance has got the heart of a Husker, man. Black shirt defense. Let's go. Let's go. She's like, no, Dylan Raiola's finally here. We're back. We're back, baby. I'm not dying.
I can't go now.
Come on. That's our MVP. Small sample Heisman to Constance.
Oh, for sure.
That's our highest honor.
Our
highest honor. So our thoughts are with their family, but good for her. Good for her. All right. We better end this before I die or get killed. We'll be back next week. Continue to subscribe, share us on social media, tell your friends about us. We'll talk to you later.